Hi, before we get started with the episode, we just wanted to point you in the direction of the social accounts we've set up for the show to help you guys engage with us and communicate and get involved with our show.
You can email us at can'tdisappointpodcast@gmail.com.
Emailing us will really be the best way to talk to us directly and conversate with us on air during the show.
Also, be sure to like You Can't Disappoint a Podcast on Facebook.
And you can also follow us on Instagram at Can't Disappoint Podcast and Twitter at You Can't Disapod. That's disapod like disappoint. So there's one S and two P's. Well, thanks for tuning in, and let's kick off the episode.
Here we go.
You've just stopped being a study group. You've become something unstoppable. I hereby pronounce you a community.
Okay, let's do it. We're gonna go. Okay.
Okay, I'll follow your lead.
Hello, this is You Can't Disappoint a Podcast, the very first episode. I'm Zach,
I'm Steven.
and we're here to talk about one of our very favorite sitcoms, Community, episode by episode. Really excited to be doing it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Get a good chance to dive in. I haven't watched through the show in a few years now, so it'll be good to get a fresh look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so how did you first find Community?
I actually watched it when it came on originally. It came on after The Office, which I watched every week through its entirety. And I was a fan of The Soup, so I was excited to check it out at the time.
Yeah, I read a lot about, tuning into this first episode of Community. For a lot of people, it was, will Joel McHale actually be able to act? Because he was just like the Soup guy,
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm right there with you. I caught the first episode of Community as it aired, like after The Office, like you said, and it didn't do a whole lot for me.
Totally. I think that I remember watching maybe the first half of the first season and not really jumping back, not really disliking it, but I definitely didn't like it as much as The Office at the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly why. This was 11 years ago, so I would have been like 12.
Yeah, we were not necessarily at the refined point we are now.
Yeah, the mature man of 23 that stands before you today.
Exactly.
I don't know. The first episode's really like Breakfast Club referential, and
Yes.
has the whole episode just feels like those 80s group of misfits movies. And at the time I watched the show for the first time, I hadn't seen any of those movies yet. So I don't think the references really did a lot for me at the time. But now I can see it through a totally different lens.
See, I had definitely seen and was well aware of The Breakfast Club when I saw this, and I think that's why I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think my biggest issue early on was more so just kind of not the pacing, but just the delivery was a little different early on. I'm normally not a fan of pilot episodes of shows because they're
Pilots are tough.
Yeah, they're hard to be good, right? Because it's like, oh, let me introduce you to everybody, and that just gets very repetitive, over time. But I actually think they do a fairly good job of introducing everyone without them, kind of forcing down your throat. Here's another character. Here's another character. Like you kind of, get introduced to all of them sporadically, but also in one big burst, which is cool.
Yeah, So I saw the first episode when it aired. It didn't stick. I didn't keep watching the show. And then years later, it would have been between seasons like 3 and 4, I rented all the DVDs and just binged them and fell in love with them. And I've always been obsessed with TV. I feel like not in always, but I do feel like I relate to Abed a little bit to where, especially when I was younger, it was like media was my everything. And Community was one of the first shows that I got to fall in love with and get engaged with it a little bit, like throughout the years when the show was really on the bubble and it was never for certain if it was going to come back or not. I was right there with everybody, like tweeting up a storm. And I remember when they got canceled after season 5, I was messaging Netflix support trying to get them to pick up the show. And I don't know, it's one of the first shows that I got really into, that it just felt like a active, loving fan community that just loves this show.
It did, totally. It's funny how I got back into Community was because of Donald Glover. I
Yeah.
saw the music video for one of his earlier songs on TV and I was like, oh, I like that. And I became a big fan of his music. And after that, I decided to give Community another chance. I think it was probably season 3 was about to start. So the second season had aired. And so then I watched the first 2 seasons. I think I must have rented them or something because I don't think it was on Hulu at the time.
I remember getting them from the
then,
library.
Yeah. So I remember I watched them and I really enjoyed it, and then watched season 3 on TV, and I kind of stuck with it through the first 5 seasons, and then I was right there with you. You know, when it got canceled, very upset. But I actually only watched, I think, the first episode maybe of season 6 when it aired on Yahoo Screen.
Yeah,
you
didn't really fall into season 6, did you?
I didn't.
And of course, we'll get there a long time in the future.
Yeah, 100%. So I've actually never seen season 6 of the show, which I kind of at some point became a little bit intentional because I knew we were planning to watch through it all again at some point, and so I was kind of waiting for that moment, and it has come upon us.
Yeah, and I think it'll be great to get your perspective on watching those episodes for the first time when we do get to them. So we can
Absolutely.
have, like, I know them pretty well and you won't know them, so your reaction will be fresh and real. Whereas while watching this pilot for like the probably 80th time, I don't know how many times I've tried to get people to watch this show with me, it's hard to, I was really trying to put myself in that mentality of I'm watching this for the first time and I'm trying to absorb this and fall back in love with it. And it's hard to separate your love for the show. I don't know. It's hard to separate and to see it through new eyes. I don't know.
Well, absolutely. I feel kind of lucky because since it's been so long since I've seen the pilot, especially, I remembered most of the jokes, but a couple of them definitely hit like it was the first time, which was kind of fun. And I really enjoyed kind of getting to see some of the characters before they're really developed, and before you actually know what you know about them, just kind of in that infancy stage of, you know, here I am.
Right. So before we get too deep into it, just to say, we're discussing the pilot episode of Community. It's just titled Pilot. It originally aired on September 17th, 2009, and it was directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, which, do you know who those people are?
The names sound familiar. What else did they do?
The Russo brothers now are like the most sought after directors in all of Hollywood. They direct all the Avengers movies now.
Okay, that's what the Avengers is what I knew their names from.
They started with, I think it was Captain America, Winter Soldier. And they directed the most recent Endgame, and I don't know, I don't really watch the Marvel movies, whichever one was before Endgame. Infinity War? Is that what it's called?
War,
I don't
know. I thought both of those were fantastic. And as a big fan of the Marvel movies, 2 of the best superhero movies to ever be made, I think.
Okay, so the Russo brothers got their start directing TV like this. They directed a lot of episodes of Arrested Development. And
which, you know, we both love.
Oh, yeah, I love it. And they were pretty integral in Community coming together and working with Dan Harmon to create the look of the show, and they helped cast. They helped get Dan connected with the band who wrote the theme song, all kinds of stuff. So they were huge for the show, and they directed they directed this first episode, and the episode looks great.
I think so too. Yeah, definitely the shots are really cool. There's a really cool shot we'll probably talk about later on when they're at the table that definitely stands out to me.
This episode, it makes the school feel really big, and all the people on campus, and there's a lot going on, which isn't what happens for the rest of the show, but they just really did a good job making this feel like a living, breathing place.
Yeah, totally. Especially like even the opening scene with Dean Pelton standing, you know, at a very small podium with a little boombox, but it still looks like he's giving some sort of orientation speech to, you know, students.
To literally whoever will listen that's nearby.
Yeah. Whoever just happens to be walking by at the time.
And then also, it was directed by the Russo brothers, and it was written by Dan Harmon, the series creator. The show came from Dan's experience going to a community college, and he kind of mimicked the Jeff character after himself a little bit, which if you know much about Dan Harmon, I think that shows a lot.
Absolutely.
And I guess he went to a community college to try to... He had like a girlfriend that he was having trouble with. And to try to make the relationship better, they both signed up for community college and both signed up for Spanish class. And he thought that like the drive to and from class and all that would be helpful and it would make their relationship better. And it didn't, but it led to the idea for the show, which is great.
Well, hey, at least we came out winners in the situation.
Right. And I'm honestly surprised that he didn't take the concept of the show a little more literal to that and make it like he was with an ex-girlfriend.
It would have been so easy to do that. And
feels like that would have worked really well, but I don't think it would have been as good.
Absolutely. I think it might have, been a little more successful early on, but I don't think that would have had the staying power that the show ended up doing.
But I guess while he was in this community college, he kind of did form a group of people that were different from him and he learned a lot from, and he's someone who's really kind of narcissistic and kind of closed off from other people, and it helped him. It helped warm his heart a little bit, which shows a lot. I think he captures that feeling really well throughout the show.
I think so too, and I think that it was interesting reading that he had based the character off himself, because I had never read that before.
Yeah,
doing the research for this episode, but it's kind of seeing how Jeff develops and things like that. It's kind of cool how he takes a look at himself through that lens, because Jeff is not necessarily painted as a stand-up guy, especially in this first episode.
Yeah, we'll get to it as we really go through it, but there are a couple of things that Jeff does in this episode or says that I was like, wow, I don't remember him being so... Like, he was always kind of an ass, but he's kind of mean in this episode a couple places, and he's the main character of the show that we're supposed to like and root for. And this says a lot to Joel McHale's... He has such a great screen presence, and he's so funny, and he's so likable even when... He's like, ain't I a scamp, He's so likable even when he's being terrible. So Joel McHale actually got casted on the show because of Dan Harmon's girlfriend at the time. They were really having trouble finding Jeff because he is kind of an unlikable character a little bit, but you have to like him, so you need someone who can really balance that. And I guess the soup was on, and Dan Harmon's girlfriend was like, that's the guy. And
wow.
Dan Harmon agreed, and he met with Joel. And that's how that came.
Cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Same with... I thought this was super interesting with Chevy being casted. So obviously Chevy Chase being the legend that he is, like truly, regardless of his just the way he acts and talks to people. Apparently, he's a comedy legend. He's super funny. And before the show, Dan had admired him for a long time, which of course he did. And he really wanted Pierce to help Chevy's career because Chevy had this bad reputation before Community of being hard to work with and being mean to people on set.
Totally.
Being a diva. And so he wanted Dan wanted Pierce to be kind of a pathetic character. And he really wanted Chevy to not like ham up the wise ass character that he normally is. And he wanted him to let Pierce be like this pathetic old man. And I think, at least I think Chevy did a pretty good job of it. I know there's a lot out there about how difficult he was to work with. So I don't know how much of it is his effort and how much of it is what they salvaged.
Well, and when I was reading that, I kind of laughed because at first I was like, well, Pierce is a total wise ass the whole show. But then I thought, and I was like, you know what? He is pathetic, and he is the butt of the joke, which normally, in Chevy Chase's roles, he really isn't that.
Yeah, he's usually like the Jeff.
Exactly.
Which is a big part of the show is, how Pierce sees Jeff as a younger version of himself, and he wants to be like Jeff, and he wants Jeff to like him.
Totally.
The other thing I read that was interesting was... Even further, Pierce was based off of Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase's ancestors are the Crane family, and they have an empire of some sort that makes a lot of different products that we still use today, kind of similar to Hawthorne wipes.
That's hilarious. I never knew that.
What else we got? Annie was modeled after a character from the movie Election that Reese Witherspoon played. I haven't seen that film, but I've heard it's good.
It is. It's, right? Reese Witherspoon in that time didn't really miss a whole lot. Yeah. Especially if you're a fan of the name just Legally Blonde, which I'm a big fan, especially of the first one. And I think that Election's kind of in that same vein where she plays that, really cutesy but still really smart kind of character. And I think that seeing that Annie was based off that character makes a lot of sense. I like it.
Yeah, and I guess they originally wanted Annie to potentially be Asian or Latina to have more diversity in the group, but they had trouble finding someone who fit that archetype. And then they knew Alison Brie, who was on Mad Men at the time, and I guess she was one of the last people they casted for the show. It came together kind of last minute, and I'm really glad.
I am too, because I appreciate the them wanting to find a diverse group, but I think that Alison Brie really plays the character pretty perfectly, and is so spot on.
Yeah, her speaking voice has this manner of being so like soft and gentle and cuddly, but there's something more to it. I don't know.
Absolutely, and I feel like she's very intentional about when she switches to a lower tone.
Kind of like Shirley a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I saw, that I learned this from listening to the audio commentary for the pilot, Jim Rash was casted the day before shooting his scene in the pilot.
Are you serious?
He's only in the one scene at the very beginning of the pilot, and I guess they had a lot of trouble casting the Dean. They met with a lot of people, and nobody really fit it, and they found Jim and casted him the day before they filmed his scene when they were already halfway done shooting the pilot.
Wow. That's crazy.
Man, Jim Rash and Dean Pelton, such an amazing, important part of the show, even if not quite in this first episode.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially in the latter seasons, I felt myself, looking forward to whatever the Dean was going to do that episode. Because he was guaranteed to get one laugh, I feel like, every episode.
Joel McHale says all the time, Joel McHale and Ken Jeong have a podcast now that I love listening to, and he says it on the podcast, and he even says it on the commentary I listened to tonight about how Jim Rash is just one of those people that he would have a line that's not specifically funny, that there's not specifically a laugh in it, and he would just make it hilarious somehow.
That's awesome. I believe it, absolutely. A thing that I read as well, when it comes to improvisation and things like that, was that Chevy Chase, a lot of the time, a lot of his, script was unscripted. A lot of the, kind of scene enders he would come up with himself, which is kind of cool. And not terribly surprising because of how successful he was on SNL.
Yeah, but I think it's cool, and I also think it probably led to some of the frustration with him. Mm-hmm. I think that he would pretty much only improvise a lot of the time.
Even when he wasn't supposed to, probably.
Right. Something I learned from the commentary that I thought was super interesting, the costumer for the pilot, the person who put the look of all the characters together for the pilot, is the costume designer for Wes Anderson's films.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting.
Okay, I'd be interested to kind of really pay attention to the colors then, because I know the Dean early on, the thing I know is he's dressed like Dwight Schrute. But
there's some interesting costuming choices in this episode. In one of Jeff's first scenes, when he's in Duncan's office, he's wearing sweatpants with his suit jacket and V-neck under it. And throughout the episode, Pierce has these 2 necklaces on that I don't totally get. Yeah.
Yeah. Annie's sweater is also a very interesting chartreuse bright shade that
Yeah, the costuming really pops. Yeah, and I think that's really interesting that that's the person who did that. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. I also learned in the original script for the pilot, Jeff's last name was Crocker. It was
really?
Jeff Crocker.
Jeff Crocker.
And that just doesn't sound right.
No, I think that Winger sounds more like a,
Jeff
cool
Winger,
guy.
Jeffrey Winger, and just like how the trope of each episode ending with a Winger speech, the name Winger, it just resonates with Jeff and with Community. And I wonder why they made that change. I wonder if they knew that it didn't have the right ring, because that's something really trivial. If his name was Crocker, we wouldn't think any otherwise, because that's just what it was. So I wonder
where
that
Winger sounds so much cooler.
Yeah, if I ever
so much more fitting.
If I ever got a chance to talk to anybody who would have an answer, I would love to see why that happened or what made the change.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one that's for the better, but I wonder what brought that about. If it was a suggestion, they were like,
One more fun fact, and then a couple of mistakes from the pilot. The fun fact is that Shirley's first "That's nice" was an ad lib.
Really? Are you serious?
It happens right after Jeff, in his big speech at the end, says, "I pronounce you a community."
A community,
And Shirley says, "I like that. That's nice." Yvette Nicole Brown said on the Darkest Timeline podcast that she just said that as a reaction. And it really
crazy.
Worked for her character, and it became, a catchphrase.
That's her whole thing. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. The couple of mistakes that were pointed out from this one. In the pilot, Jeff mentions that he asked to replace his bachelor's to practice law again. Mm-hmm. But then later in the series, in season 4, when he graduates with an associate in education.
Huh.
which is interesting.
Yeah, that's I feel like that wouldn't have been too hard to keep track of.
Yeah, I wonder what the decision-making process for that was like. And I'm sure it wouldn't have been that way if Dan was around season 4.
Yeah, right?
I'm not sure what they were going for with that. The other thing, the study room in this episode is shown to be upstairs.
Yeah, she does say come back upstairs at the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm. And, well, a lot of the sets in this episode, you can tell, are different from where they normally shot the show.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the outside campus looks different. After this pilot, when they went back to continue filming the season, that they rebuilt sets and built a set that looked just like the study room. So yeah, in this first episode, they mention it being upstairs, and it never is on the rest of the show.
Oh.
Also, Britta claims to have been a part of the Peace Corps for a while as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Which is impossible because to volunteer for them, you have to have a bachelor's degree.
Oh, and she said she dropped out of high school.
Yep.
Didn't quite fact check that one.
Yep. So that's what I've got as far as like fun facts and mistakes.
I thought as a mistake you were just going to mention the opening song and graphic in general, because that was rough. But
opening song and graphic. What do you mean?
There's like a little 2-second little community thing that pops up with like a really blurry shot of like people sped up walking around the little kind of outside area.
I don't remember that.
Maybe it's not on the DVD one. Maybe they got rid of it.
I don't know. The Hulu version that you watched should have been the full. I know I read that on Amazon and on Netflix, for whatever reason, the episodes have been edited a little bit. For instance, there's a scene towards the beginning of the pilot where Jeff's talking to like the older lady and talks to her about being like how he thinks all older black women are like cosmic. Apparently that scene's cut out. When she calls him
I thought that was funny.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
I guess
I laughed at that.
I guess that scene's cut out. There was actually a pretty long list of stuff that was cut out.
Wow, that's crazy. I wonder why they cut so much out.
Like 3 or 4 minutes shorter.
Wow.
Do we have trivia questions? Let's go ahead.
I do. I have 3, and I have an alternate
I also have
in case
3.
one of us have the same.
I also have 3. Let's go back and forth. You can go first.
Okay, this one's kind of a, where you're really looking, but you've seen this episode enough times that you might get this right.
We'll see.
What color are the 3 balloons tied to the boombox at the beginning?
Oh my goodness, Steven.
The other ones aren't that brutal. I promise.
You really wanted to stump me, didn't you?
I did. I was like, I'll do one really just like rude
I
one.
know one was red.
Mm-hmm.
Was it red, white, and black?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Is that exactly right? Nice.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Nicely done.
All right, so for you, what were Toastmaster Pierce's false introductions for each study group member?
Right, you already know Brittles.
Britta?
Abed the Arab. Is that inappropriate?
Sure.
Roy the Wonder Boy.
Roy.
Little Princess Elizabeth.
Annie.
And finally, this beautiful creature is named Shirley.
Is that even close?
Oh, that would be Brittles. Abed the Arab.
And then he follows it up with, is that inappropriate?
Is that inappropriate?
Sure.
And Ahmed goes, sure.
Sure.
And then, it's Roy. Roy the...
yeah.
That's our boy Roy or something like that.
Very
and then
close.
Princess Elizabeth.
Yes. And the last one, the most important one.
Well, I don't remember all the flowery things he says before it, but he calls Shirley by her right name.
Yeah, just Shirley. It was
Shirley.
Roy the Wonder Boy.
Roy the Wonder Boy.
But
it's Troy.
I'm going to give you that one. We'll get back to this one later.
That was
as
one
we
of my
go through-
hardest laughs.
To go through the episode. What was the one I was thinking of? Damn it. We can cut all this anyway. Let's just start over. Hi! Welcome to episode 1 of...
Hi, I'm
Oh, yeah.
Steven.
My favorite part of that is he says, and this delicate creature is, of course, Shirley. And Jeff goes, is that even close? And
Is that even close?
Shirley just gives it like a look. Okay, go ahead. What's my next one?
All right. What game did Britta say that Jeff was playing on his phone all during
Bejeweled.
the class?
Bejeweled. It was Bejeweled. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
How much money do you think Bejeweled paid to slip that one in there? Or you think that was a freebie?
I think they probably had to pay Bejeweled. That game used to be
worth it?
everywhere and so popular.
That's true.
It was like Candy Crush.
Absolutely.
I think Candy Crush literally is Bejeweled.
Isn't it just the same thing? Did they just switch it to candy instead?
Who cares? All right, we should do
cares?
we should just scrap the community podcast and do a Candy Crush podcast.
Oh yeah, let's do it. I've never played Candy Crush, so
Me
it
either.
could really be my Candy Crush saga.
We could review episode by episode. There's a Candy Crush game show hosted by Mario Lopez, I'm pretty sure.
You're kidding.
I don't know. We could find out.
I believe it.
All right, next question for you. This one's a little easier. What was Troy's specific injury in high school?
It was from dislocating both shoulders doing a keg flip. Not a keg stand,
Yes.
a keg flip, which is very difficult.
There you go. Okay.
Okay, that was a good one. Speaking Troy-related question.
Okay.
What high school did Troy and Annie go to?
Oh my goodness. I can hear the lines when they're talking about it because he's like, "How did you know I went to?" This is a guess. I don't think I know. Is Northwestern?
Close. You're not really close.
What was it?
Riverside.
Yeah. No.
Now the alternate. I did have an alternate question in case one of
Okay.
ours were the same, so I can throw that at you too.
Okay, well, I'll do
No
my
problem.
last one, then you can.
Go ahead.
Okay, what was Professor Duncan attempting to get during his car accident?
Oh, is it a chalupa?
Yeah, it sure is a chalupa.
Nice. That was a good one.
I love chalupas.
Oh, I wanted to say gordita for some reason. Maybe I just got,
Is gordita a real thing, or is that like a Taco Bell
I don't
word?
know. Is that only a Taco Bell thing? It might just be a Taco Bell.
Yeah, I think it might be.
Well, my alternate question, you'll probably get this one. What
Okay.
class did Annie sit behind Troy in?
See, I was thinking so hard about what my questions were going to be. That
Right? That
didn't-
you missed the weird stuff.
Algebra? Was it algebra?
That's exactly what it was. Algebra, yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Nice. So you still got 3 right.
Yeah, and so did
that
you.
was good.
No, well, I got three. I
That
got
was
3
good.
out of 4.
We paid pretty good.
Yeah, we
But
did.
to be fair, you got the really ridiculously hard one that if you hadn't seen the episode like 80 times, I don't think anyone would get that. 'Cause that's not...
I feel like you were trying to think of something really hard, and you were like, that was one of the first images in the episode. So you're like, what are those colors? Write them down.
It was like the very first. I was like, haha.
So yeah, let's get right into it.
All right, let's do it.
The episode starts off with those red, white, and black balloons, and this really great shot of the Greendale campus, and we meet Dean Pelton. I think it's so fitting that he's the first character that we see in the show, even if he's barely in the pilot. I think he's such a welcoming face to
Absolutely.
bring us into this world, even if this is a slightly less chaotic version of it,
Right?
And everybody looks like a baby.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so weird seeing Donald Glover especially because he just like visually looks so different. Like even his face, Annie looks like, I'm sorry, Allison Brie looks so young.
The Dean, he looks tiny. Like he looks a
Yeah.
lot younger than he does in the future and how he looks now. And especially Donald and Joel even. Joel's gotten way more ripped.
Absolutely. Joel definitely looks a lot better.
And
now,
Chevy,
a lot, more fit.
Chevy even, he's been posting some stuff on Instagram lately, and he does not look well.
Oh no, I think the last picture I saw of him, he looked very not well, and that was probably 3 years ago when I saw something. I was like, ooh.
So I love how the Dean just like stumbles through his speech, and when he first presses play on the speaker, it's this classic Community little blurb of music that they use all the time. It's like I'm as high as hell. No, you're about to get shot. I'm as high as hell.
Yeah,
you're about to get shot.
You're about to get shot.
Yeah,
oh
it's
my
great.
Gosh.
I love it.
It's so good, and I love it how long it takes him to turn it off because it's very clear that everyone like the few people that have gathered to listen to him talk.
Yeah, most people are
Very
just doing their
quickly
own
done.
thing, and they're like, "Who is this weasel talking in the middle of the quad or whatever?"
Exactly.
I love that he just fumbles through the whole speech, and then he ends it so confidently after saying everything wrong with, "And I wish you luck."
Right.
Yeah, it's great.
It's
so
so funny.
great.
Yeah, I liked a joke that I had absolutely forgotten about that I got a really good laugh over was Abed's opening kind of joke, where he was talking about his dad and his dad not being angry at America, but he was angry at his mom for leaving. But she did leave him because he was angry, and he was angry because she was American. And just how straightforward he shoots through that is just so hilarious. And Jeff just not caring.
Both of them,
all.
that scene, that's such a great introduction for Abed specifically, but both of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny how Abed just rattles it all off, and that's the first thing we hear, and then it's the... I forget how they word it, but he was just asking what time it was.
Yeah, he was like, well, when you asked, it was 11 minutes past 5.
Yes, yes. And what does Jeff say? It was nice to get to know you and then meet you in that order.
In that order, yeah.
And during this conversation, we see Britta for the first time.
Yes, Britta,
Abed,
my heart.
Abed knows everything about Britta just from when she...
He's like, I only talked to her once.
Yeah, to borrow a pencil. Let's talk about Britta for a second, because I think, as much as I love Gillian Jacobs and Britta's character, I think Britta is probably the thing this episode does the worst.
Yeah.
There's
I don't disagree there.
There's very little to her character in this other than to be who Jeff is hoping to hop in bed with.
Absolutely.
And all of the things she does and say are just driven by that, how they fit the plot, instead of giving her much of a character.
I agree. I think that her sole purpose, like you said, is just to be kind of what Jeff is after. Mm-hmm. And Britta's a character who I think is very strong about her convictions, as misguided as they are sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like her, the honesty that she is conveying when she says how much she values honesty and all that, and then to, be like, oh, I lied. And I get that's part of the joke, but I think it just kind of keeps her depth at a very shallow level, whereas you see, Jeff growing through the episode, you see, Abed doing Abed things through the episode. They just have a lot more layers, to them than I think they give Britta right off the bat.
The only thing that she really gets that feels like Britta is that speech that she talks about her conviction and the stuff that she did. Mm-hmm. One of my trivia questions was almost, what type of model was Britta?
Oh, foot.
But I figured you would take an extra note of that, so I might not have needed to mention it.
Yeah.
And then we follow up Britta's introduction with Professor Duncan's introduction. And John Oliver is definitely one of my favorite parts of this pilot as well.
I think so too.
The chemistry between Joel and John is really funny. You can tell that they've had a history, obviously, as Jeff being his lawyer. They just play off each other really well, and this is
they sound like old friends.
Yeah,
which is cool.
Yeah,
because all the characters for the most part are strangers.
The conversation between the two of them when he's telling Duncan that he's a student here now, and his issue. It's the first scene in the show that really feels like Community. That dialogue so quippy and funny, and Jeff is classic sarcastic Jeff. His Duncan and Jeff, like, I thought you had a degree from Columbia. He's like, yes, and now I need to get one from America. That's not an email attachment. Yeah.
Absolutely, right. The thing that made me laugh probably the most in that interaction was towards the beginning when Jeff was like, oh, I'm here as a student. And John Oliver goes, well, that can't be an inspiring journey. Just right away. And like you said, it's so quick. Yeah. And that really is the first scene that kind of sets the tone for how people interact together, and it's like they're making jokes, but they're still having their conversation, and it's moving forward, and it's really enjoyable.
And it also really paints a picture of how we're expected to see Greendale. Mm-hmm. Though it's a toilet. It's
not, nobody's taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Which is it's funny because they, so many people take it so seriously that that's kind of the, both ends of the spectrum that make it so funny.
The interaction about what would have been a DUI incident is really funny. When Jeff said, I don't know if Jeff or Duncan says it, but I don't know how you were able to tie my DUI into 9/11 and let alone why that helped.
Right? And he's like, 2002 was just a simpler time. A simpler time.
Yeah, it was really funny. Oh. And then from there we just get... Go ahead.
Yeah, and I like how they call back to it later in the episode, and he gives a little more specifics about, what he was doing, and it's just, it's very funny.
After that scene, we get just a really small hint of what is one of my favorite theme song sequences of all time. We just get a little spread out the cootie catcher that says Community, and it made me
Okay, see,
yeah.
now in the version that I watched, it was not that.
It didn't have the full theme. It didn't. So okay, so that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, because I actually wrote down opening graphic is trash because I love the Community opening so much. This was like a Blair Witch Project on a sunny day.
Really?
Yeah, it's very clearly, you know, something they made for that, but I had never realized that it was different.
Why would they do that?
I don't know. It was awful, and it wasn't the right song or like notes or
Yeah.
even notes that would resemble the right song.
I don't
And then he
think they played any of the song in my version.
Mm-hmm.
It literally just showed the folded out paper that says Community, and
Yeah,
like,
that's
on the
interesting.
table.
This one did not show the paper. It was like
Interesting.
some different graphic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the theme song sequence to Community so much. I can't wait
Oh,
to hear
yeah.
it 1,000 times while we do this.
Oh, totally. I'm not skipping it once. That's not how we roll.
So from that, we go to the cafeteria, and there's just this little blurb of Pierce making a hot dog that is so funny. It's so funny.
And it paints Greendale in like just the perfect, you know, it's just a
so
great
funny.
view. Because doesn't he take like a ketchup bottle and it squirts out mayonnaise?
Yeah,
or
it's full of
something?
mayonnaise, and there's like a guy next to him that's just staring at him, and he hides it under like a thing that's just full of sliced bread. It's
Why
really
does their cafeteria have a bin of bread? It's great.
According to the commentary, apparently when they had Chevy do this, he just did so much cafeteria material. They were like, hey, what can you do that's funny in a cafeteria? And he was like, oh, I can do this and this and this and like 150 different things. And then he just like did it for forever. And they were like, Chevy, we can use like 10 seconds of that.
I 100% believe that Chevy Chase has like a whole novel full of cafeteria material just waiting to be used.
I don't think he plans that far ahead. I think he just goes.
He just has fun in the cafeteria.
Yeah. So Jeff comes up to Britta in the cafeteria and pitches her the study group, and that's where we get that, oh, the guy who was playing Bejeweled on his phone all day.
Mm-hmm.
And Britta asks him to speak Spanish to prove that he really can, and he just mumbles off these random Spanish words that seem to work together. She just goes with it.
Right? Because what does she know?
Yeah, I really need help with Spanish, she says, and Jeff, I was willing to bet.
What's he say? Like you're an hour late for Spanish. I scratched my ear or something like that.
I don't know. And then he says his name, Jefe.
Jefe. Jefe.
Something really small that I thought was weird. When those interactions happened, the Spanish subtitles were like in the middle of the screen instead of on the bottom.
They were in the middle.
It was a little weird.
It was really weird, especially the one that stands out to me is when he says Jefe, because it's like all by itself in the center of the screen, and it looks very strange.
Doesn't really matter, but I thought that was a strange choice. Maybe it was to not mess with the like closed captioning that some people would have to be using. I don't know.
That's a good thought.
So then we get this little scene of Jeff talking to an older woman who is supposed to be the lunch lady. And I guess there were several more scenes with the two of them in the original script for the pilot, and they cut all of them but this one. So that's why she says something at the end of their little interaction about like, maybe you can pay for your tacos or something like that, because she's a lunch lady and he wasn't paying for his food.
Well, which also confused me. I thought that was a weird scene because it doesn't
weird.
seem like he would just go through and not pay for his food. Like there's nothing about him that would say that he can't, afford it or anything like that. He says that he makes or made a lot of money doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
So I thought that was odd. Now I do like that actress. She was on Bones. I enjoyed her a lot on that. She was also, if we have any Good Luck Charlie fans out there.
Is that who that was?
Next door neighbor. Yeah, she played next door neighbor on Good Luck Charlie.
Yeah, Mrs. Dabney.
There we go.
Yeah. Not that I've ever watched that show, of course.
Never seen it. Never heard of it.
No. I want to know, how do you feel about that line?
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. I was raised on TV, and I was conditioned to believe that every black woman over 50 is a cosmic mentor.
Were you conditioned to pay for your damn tacos, Seinfeld?
Well, and I think that's a funny line. I saw no issue with it. I laughed when I saw it, and I think it's true. A lot of times, we do portray the matronly older black woman, ready to help you out, sweetheart. That sort of thing.
But
in a lot of
Jeff walking up
movies.
to this lady and just saying that stuff. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, and I feel like that's almost kind of a jab saying his life is a TV show, which allows him to say that, but you could never go up to somebody and say that in real life. I think that would not be good at all.
Yeah, it seems more like an Abed line. It doesn't. Jeff
It
doesn't
absolutely seems like an Abed line. That's true. I didn't think of it that way.
Jeff doesn't seem like the type of person to be like, I'm seeing everything through a television lens. I think it's
a very Abed thing.
mostly that Dan Harmon sees things that way, and he wrote the episode.
Right? That
Let's
makes sense.
see. So then we get that little it's Seinfeld interaction. That's pretty funny. The next scene, we get Britta walking into study group, and she is the only person there. We see the classic study room, study table. Just seeing that room, I don't know. It just gives me the warm fuzzies.
I know, it was cool, because you picture so many... We all have different scenes that come to mind, if you've seen the whole show, that took place in the study room, and you just you jump right back there, and it's kind of cool.
A lot of shows have their location that all the characters hang out at that are iconic, like Central Perk or... I don't know. And this one is just maybe my very favorite. I love it. I just love it. It's just
I like it because...
It's just comfort.
Exactly. And they can do so much in that room and so much, in that space because it is, it's just a study room, but they do a really great job throughout the series of making it so much more than that.
Right. And Jeff does this whole, here's the contact sheet, trying to get Britta's number. And what I thought watching the scene, why does Britta stay? Why does she sit down and talk to him? What does she think? Does she really think she's got to know immediately that this is just a ploy? And that Jeff hasn't invited any other people, and that's pretty creepy. And she just kind of goes with it. They don't dwell on it too long.
I think the fact that she invites Abed shows that she knows that it's not legitimate.
Right? Yeah. Right. She does do that, and they get the whole group together pretty fast. But for a second, I don't know. If Britta was a real person, I don't think she'd sit down and start telling this dude her deal. Who's tricked her into coming to a fake study session.
Absolutely. I think that is a little unrealistic.
This is one of the things that makes me a little bit iffy about Jeff on this episode, which I hate because he's a great character. Joel McHale's great in this episode. There's just a couple of things that were, I don't know, a little cringy.
Absolutely. And Jeff is not my favorite character in the show. I like Joel McHale a lot. Yeah. But I'm not the biggest Jeff Winger fan myself. And I think this episode just kind of pushes Y a little bit. Now, he's not, this bad throughout the show, but he definitely comes off as kind of a jerk a few times.
So they're talking about honesty, and then Abed walks into the room, and I love this little moment where it's breaking the awkwardness. Britta feels relieved that Abed is there, and she goes, woo! And then Abed just kind of mechanically responds, woo! I don't know. I thought it was really funny that he was just, I don't know. There are a lot of little Abed moments in this episode that stand out that I don't think I've noticed before that show how great of a representation this is of someone who probably has autism without making it about that.
100%. I also, in that scene, is the first time he goes cool, 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 which was a nice little warm, fuzzy moment for me. But I made note of how great a job that Danny Pudi does with that, because, I've worked with students with special needs with varying from, severe autism to even more, Asperger's and things like that. And he does such a great job with the mannerisms, even from, if you watch his gaze kind of jump from thing to thing, how his attention span kind of works and things like that, I think is so good. And it's so he's not doing it very largely so that your eyes go there, but he's constantly either moving his fingers or things like that would just display that sort of behavior. And I think it's just brilliant.
Yeah, when shows have characters like that, they usually do a lot of the same things that Danny Pudi does as Abed, but it just feels so put upon or just over dramatic and not quite realistic.
Absolutely.
We'll get to it later, but probably my favorite little moment of Abed being real in this episode is in the end when they're all yelling on the steps. No, it's not in the end when they're all yelling on the steps. It's when he's in the study room and they're all arguing and he's covering his ears because it's too loud.
Yeah.
And he's the only one that's not
Britta
yelling.
walks in to comfort him.
Yeah, I thought that was a really nice moment too. In this scene where Abed walks in for the first time, I love a couple of the jokes in here. When they're talking about the Breakfast Club, and he says, "I've got a real emotional one, or a doozy in case things get emotional down the line," which pays off really well later on.
Oh my god, yeah.
And we
Hilarious.
also get that great, he's like, oh, I got a text. I've never gotten one of these before. Let's give this bad boy a read. Jeff's like, it's probably just for you. He's like, what does he say? He's like, something,
Say
I
you have to pee.
Say
you have to pee. I need to talk to you.
It's probably you just for
Say
your
you
ride.
have to pee, I need to talk to you. Say you have to pee.
That is weird.
Say you have to pee, I need to talk to
Do
you.
you have to pee?
No. That's so weird.
Well, I'm stumped.
And then Jeff gets a text from Duncan, which has a really funny misabbreviation.
Yeah,
Like,
con for sate.
Chin.
Yeah.
And Abed's like, does it say you have to pee?
Oh gosh, I like. There's a little. Jeff's like, "Do you have to pee?" And Abed's like, "No."
He's like, no.
It's like creepy.
Well, I'm stumped.
Yeah, I'm stumped. That was good. Also, I do have a little note here. I do not think that Britta looks like Elizabeth Shue at all.
I was just about to say that. That interaction is really funny. She's like, hey, Abed, what's your read on that guy? You look like Elizabeth Shue.
Like,
It's so funny.
She doesn't, you know.
Well, then this next scene, we've got Jeff and Duncan out on the football field, which is a great scene, but it feels so weird having them be outside on a football field. Just compared to
strange.
how small Greendale feels in later seasons, it just feels like this huge college campus. Like, what community college has a huge football field like this and a football team like that?
Yeah,
But-
not Greendale.
Jeff and Duncan have this great back and forth about moral relativism and if it's okay or not for him to steal the answers and whether or not God exists, and it's
Right.
really great. He's like, you can't talk to me like that. A 6-year-old could talk to me like that. Yes, they could, and it would be adorable. And Duncan like gestures with both of his hands in his coat pocket, and it's really funny. It's like no, because
Yeah.
you're a 5-year-old girl, and there's a pecking order. I think it's really funny. I wish John Oliver would have been able to be a more consistent character on the show. I think he's so funny.
I do too. I really liked his role on the show.
So after this, we go back to the study room, and everybody's there for the first time. Everybody's there together. We've got the whole group. We've got Shirley, Abed, Annie,
Brittles,
Elizabeth. Roy the Wonder Boy. Yeah, and it's so great to have them all in the same room. It's so funny.
It was pretty great to see everybody back in the room. You know, for the first time, but for the first time in a long time for me, that was pretty great.
Yeah, Jeff walking into the room, being surprised by all these people, then seeing everyone around the study room table. It's a great moment. Such a
Yeah, I
great
agree.
ensemble cast.
I also like how quickly Jeff makes his exit. He really doesn't give anybody to be introduced or anything like that. He just kind of gets the heck out.
Yeah, all of the characters immediately spout out things that are so true to their character. Like Shirley's like, I gotta get home by 10 because to get rid of the babysitter. Or
Right?
Annie's like, when will the board certified tutor get here? They're just all like right into it for being a first episode. I think that's really great.
Right.
Even if
really
they're
good.
not quite at 100% yet, what they've got is great.
I think so for sure. It really establishes that they already know who they are before, we kind of get into it. Because sometimes you see characters in shows that act one way in the first couple episodes because they weren't really meant to be a main character or weren't meant to be really fleshed out, or they didn't know if the show's getting picked up or anything like that. But
Right.
they very clearly, have their own identities already, which is pretty great.
Then I love that, like you mentioned, Jeff's just like, I'm going to go grab my jacket, or I'm going to go outside for a second, and I'm going to take my jacket, keys, and wallet with me. And then he walks outside, and there's Britta. And this is another one of those scenes where I'm not totally on board with what they're trying to do with Britta, where she's like, I'll go to dinner with you if you can teach all these people, and he's like, I'll prove
Right.
that they're untutorable. I don't know. This is just the most, like, sitcom-y, will they, won't they thing, and I don't know. I just don't care for it that much. That's not what I like this show for.
I agree. I was never really a big fan of the whole Jeff Britta, whatever you want to call it, tension.
Or just really whenever this show puts characters together romantically,
It's
it
not.
doesn't
usually.
totally work for me. But we'll get to that. I think they did some of it better than others.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so then next we get everyone's back in the study room after Jeff promises to prove that everyone's untutorable, so Britta will go to dinner with him, and he comes in to get them egged on and fight each other. This is when we get that great scene of Pierce introducing himself, introducing Hawthorne wipes, and introducing the entire group really incorrectly.
Right, totally. I something about this scene that kind of struck me was how aggressive Annie was early on. With like right away with Shirley, I feel like Annie always kind of stood up for herself when she could, but she was very quick to jump on Shirley with stopping with all the pumpkins and sweeties.
Yeah, that was a nice moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is where we get this great situation where they're all starting to get mad at each other, and I love the way that it progresses. That just starts about them talking about how Annie's young and whether or not that she deserves respect because of it, and Shirley talking about how when you're an adult you get respect, and everyone starts to fight. I just think it's really great how they progress the conflict.
Absolutely, and how nobody but Britta seems to realize that Jeff is just stirring the pot. He jumps right away like, "Oh, well, Pierce, let's talk about this." Or like, "Oh, it seems like you got something pent up." Something, really just kind of stirring it. And everyone's just kind of going along and being egged on by it, except, Britta keeps looking at him like, "What are you doing?" But everyone else is kind of wrapped up in their own, stance that they're taking on whatever nonsense it is that they're taking a stand on at this moment, because it's really over nothing, but it kind of really sets the tone for how stuff goes.
That interaction, how the group just all yells at each other, and then Jeff steps in to bring it all back together. Yeah, it does set up that feel that the show does a lot really well for the first time.
Absolutely.
I love this little interaction with Shirley and Pierce again, where someone says to Pierce, "Are you not aware that you've been sexually harassing her since the beginning of class?" And Pierce is like, "What?" He's just like confounded. He's like, "Why would I sexually harass someone who turns me on?"
And then the king that he is, Roy the Wonder Boy, comes in, stand up for her.
That is sexual harassment. Yeah, I think that line's really funny. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't like Pierce's character, which I totally get. It's probably a mix of all the Chevy drama and the type of jokes that they give him are pretty lowbrow. But I think he's so funny, and he's such a pathetic character, and he's so specifically weird, and a lot of it's Chevy's mannerisms, but I just find the character hilarious. Just about every time he talks in this episode are some of my biggest laughs in the whole thing.
Yeah, I like him. I think that he does such a great job of playing a character that you love to hate.
Yeah.
And those a lot of times end up being some of my favorite characters in shows. Even if I dislike Pierce.
We get some great episodes in the future, like the Dungeons & Dragons episode that has a lot to do with Pierce as a villain and Pierce versus the group, that they get a lot of great mileage out of it. After that little interaction with Pierce, then we get into the revelation that Troy and Annie went to high school together. Yeah. And that Troy was like this jock football icon at his school, and Annie was in a class with him and clearly had a crush on him, and Troy doesn't remember her like at all, which, how can you not remember Allison Brie?
Yeah, I get that he was hot stuff, but Allison Brie's still Allison Brie. G.
In what high school is Allison Brie like the plain looking one? You know what I'm like, right? the one that you don't remember. Maybe Troy was just so full of himself that he didn't notice. And I guess Annie had her like pill problem, so maybe she was going through her own thing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the pills changed her appearance a little bit. She's all cleaned up now, got herself together.
Little Annie Adderall's
little Annie Adderall
turned around for herself.
Good for her. We love a comeback story.
So yeah, that gets everybody yelling. Everybody's good and pissed. Jeff is smug as hell, and I love the way that Abed's like moving his fingers as each person talks and like trying to keep up with everybody's dialogue, but can't really. And then he breaks the silence.
Absolutely.
With that great callback. It's a banner year at the Bender family. It's so funny. And the way that Danny plays it, Abed almost drops a lot of his eccentricities to become the character that he's performing the dialogue of. He starts like acting a little more confident and like using more facial expressions, and you can just really tell that even though everyone else is like, "What are you doing?" that he's just like falling into something. I think it's really great. And everyone just stares at him.
Absolutely. That may be my favorite, part of the whole episode, because you kind of they do a great job of switching from Jeff's reaction, which is all smug and proud of what's going on, and then to Abed's face, who's like in a state of like panic and freaking out, and so he resorts to, like he said, he had something sealed away in case things got sticky, and it was like a spot on Judd Nelson impression that was just so good, which
Super
leads
funny.
to that awesome shot where it's almost from Abed's perspective of the of Annie and Shirley and Pierce and Troy all looking at him like, what the heck's wrong with you? But it's really cool.
Yeah, and that shot makes me think about how Troy and Abed, they're like in totally different universes in this episode, and their
Absolutely.
friendship is the heart of the show in a lot of ways. It's interesting to see that clearly wasn't a plan from the beginning. They've said on a lot of occasions that the original intent was for Pierce and Troy to kind of be like the buddy back and forth thing, but
Which they pushed for in this episode.
and in a couple episodes. There's an episode coming up where Troy, there's like a plot line where Troy lives with Pierce.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it starts like a Twitter feed where he tweets everything that Pierce says. And they are really funny together, but it's cool that, I don't know, they must have just seen the chemistry between Danny and Donald and put a lot more for their characters to do together. It's
Which resulted in some of, my favorite stuff in the show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And a lot of times the end tags right before the credits are them doing hilarious things.
Exactly.
And it's interesting to watch this first episode and see what things that we know and love the show to be were there from the beginning and what things clearly weren't there yet. And it'll be fun to watch as they come together.
And it's really nice to see that some things did stay, from the beginning into the later seasons.
So Jeff gets a call from Duncan, and I think it's so funny the way that Duncan is like masking his voice. But the first thing he says is, "It's Duncan." It's like, "It's Duncan, come outside."
It's Duncan.
He's like, "What's wrong with your voice?" "I'm disguising it. Goodbye," or something like. It's really funny.
It's so funny.
John Oliver's so funny.
That's just such like a good little bit that's, very short time-wise, but really is hilarious.
Like, come to the parking lot. And he goes outside. He's like, get in the car, get in the car. And Jeff gets in his tiny little smart car.
Little smart car.
And he says something like, I thought the line was really funny. He's like, act as if you're about to drive or as if we've just been driving.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was a good one. That definitely got a laugh out of me.
And he hands him the big envelope full of test answers, which I always thought this was another one of the weaker things of the pilot. I don't know why Jeff would think Duncan would be able to get him all of the test answers for all of his...
For all the classes for the whole semester.
It doesn't quite track. You'd think... And let alone why Jeff would give his Lexus to Duncan for these test answers.
Yeah, I feel like this was the part that I was the least invested in. I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. I appreciated Duncan being in it and the jokes that were there, but I wasn't actually super invested in the actual, that part of it, because it just didn't make sense for him to give him his Lexus.
Yeah, their chemistry and the line delivery is great, but yeah. So Jeff comes back into the room. As soon as he left, everybody started screaming again, and Jeff comes back with the envelope full of test answers, feeling especially cocky because he's got everything down now. And Britta comes out and says, dude, you got to fix this. You got to do something. All these human beings are really upset because you manipulated them, and you have to fix it. So now we get Jeff getting ready for the first Winger speech, and it's this weird... Obviously, he's still doing it because of Britta, and I wonder where the point is that switches for Jeff to start caring about these characters, Like, so far, he hasn't really given any of them the time of day other than, like, Abed, kind of.
Right? He's really the only one who he's put any, non-trying to sleep with them effort into.
And that's just because Abed kind of glues to Jeff, and I don't know.
Absolutely, and Jeff even says, I see your value now, because he helps them out with Britta, so he kind of sees that as an in.
Right. So now we get this great scene, Jeff's speech.
We're the only species on Earth that observes Shark Week. Sharks don't even observe Shark Week, but we do. For the same reason, I can pick up this pencil, tell you its name is Steve, and go like this. Oh. And part of you dies. just a little bit on the inside, because people can connect with anything. We can sympathize with a pencil, we can forgive a shark, and we can give Ben Affleck an Academy Award for screenwriting.
Big mistake.
It's a quintessential Community moment, and it's a little cheesy, but that line where he brings it all together and says,
I hereby pronounce you a community.
Oh, that's nice.
I love it. I love that it's community college, but it's also community of people.
Yeah, it's a nice way to slip the title of the show in there, and it's in a nice moment that kind of immediately shifts to funny again. But this whole thing, it cracks me up. I like the right before he walks in, you hear Troy going, "I'm the Barack Obama of this room," and that definitely made me laugh. But he's like, "What's the difference between humans and animals?" And I think Troy's the one who goes feet, and then Pierce is like, no, bears have feet.
Yeah.
But I do have issue with one thing that Jeff said here.
Okay.
Because he came at people for giving Ben Affleck an Academy Award for screenwriting, but here's the hill that I'm going to die on here. The movie that Academy Award is for is my favorite movie of all time,
Good Will Hunting.
Good Will Hunting, right? And I love that movie. And sure, maybe Matt Damon did most of the work. I wasn't there. I didn't see what happened. But we don't come for Good Will Hunting. I'm here for the Ben Affleck slander. But
he also won the Oscar for Argo.
He did, and I've never seen Argo.
Argo's okay.
Nice. I couldn't remember if he won for Gone Girl or Argo. I knew it was one of those.
No, I don't think he directed or wrote anything for Gone Girl. I think he was just in it.
He was just in it?
Yeah, that was David Fincher, I think.
David Fincher? I got you.
Mm-hmm. There's a really funny moment here. I keep going back to Pierce, but when Jeff is like, Pierce has got a lot of stuff that we should listen to, and Pierce immediately goes into, well, the Dalai Lama and I. And
he's like, and we'll all listen to it.
We should listen to him someday.
That was funny. I did like that one. I was hoping that, the Dalai Lama story would explain the freaking beads that he's got on the whole episode, but...
I also kind of like how the speech that Jeff gives is still kind of condescending to everybody. He says,
Absolutely.
Troy, so what, you think you were the best in high school? Maybe he was. But yet it still works as this triumphant speech for everybody.
Because he ends it by saying,
yeah.
Everyone's special, everyone's got something, he's like, even if you're all losers and you're here,
Yeah, he totally shows off that lawyering side where he said earlier about how he used to make a lot of money for saying stuff. I don't know. It shows now he's using that.
Yeah. Oh, and that's one thing he says earlier is that he, his whole life he found out that, if he just keeps talking, he gets to decide what's right and wrong, which goes into the whole, God thing. Or
right.
in truth being relative and all that. And
right.
he definitely shows off that skill there that he just, rambles on to a room full of strangers that he doesn't know, but makes them all feel like he does, and that he's, encouraging them.
The things that he says for each person, I don't love what he says about Abed in this one. He's like, and Abed's a shaman. You ask him for salt and he gives you soup, because soup is better and Abed is better. What?
And Pierce goes, soup? Because it doesn't make any sense.
He's like, soup? I wonder if that's a little tiny cut at the soup. I don't know.
Oh.
Maybe it could be.
Maybe. That might be it.
Jeff gives this big speech. He gets everyone feeling good, and then Britta totally calls him out for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. She's like, I know what you were doing the whole time, but we're going to actually study now, so bye.
Yeah, she's like, there's no way I'm going to dinner with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jeff says, well, I may be a lying Crete, but I have got all of the test answers. And then everybody turns on Jeff. He talks about how he makes things up. He talks about how he lies and everyone turns against him. And the line in the whole episode, the one line in the whole episode that I thought cut the deepest was when Jeff, as he's leaving after everyone's mad at him, says to Abed, you have Asperger's. He just says it blunt like that. And that cut. It cut a little deep. It's like, why would you say that to him? Abed's just
because he was saying it not like, oh, you have Asperger's. He was saying it like Asperger's was an insult, and that's crappy.
Abed says something like, at first I thought you were Bill Murray, but now I think you're Michael Douglas. And he's like, you have Asperger's. I'm like, that's just a low blow. And Abed obviously doesn't quite know what that is or if he has it. I don't know. It just wasn't the right thing for him to say. That was probably the moment for me that I liked Jeff the least in this episode.
Absolutely. I agree. I think it was just, a low blow, and it really, in real life, that would be a really awful, damaging thing to hear somebody say about somebody.
Right.
And it would pretty early on make that person less redeemable to me.
Right. And for that matter, the little Troy and Pierce giggling over the word Asperger. That's not really my favorite either.
No.
They're really pushing that Pierce and Troy dynamic, and the word Asperger's is silly. That was an easy joke. They're better than that.
It was. Yeah, I agree. And what's Pierce say? He's like, if it was something serious, should have called it meningitis or something.
That's
like
a pretty funny joke, and I feel
Yeah,
like
and I
Chevy
like that,
probably
but-
improv that. Yeah, that's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
So now we cut to outside the library, I guess is what it is. And this shot, when it's nighttime and they're sitting on the steps, first it's just Jeff opening up the envelope and seeing all the pages are blank. I think it's a really satisfyingly shot scene. I think it looks really great.
Yeah.
And also when he opens the envelope and sees all the empty pages, there's this music cue that cuts in that I think fits really well, where it's like bup 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 bup. And I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's
I
just a
noticed that too.
nice
I like that.
wrapping up the episode moment. Duncan swirling his wine in his office that he appears to maybe live in. And
Well, he's got 2 wine bottles there. One of them looks totally empty, and the other one looks mostly empty. So he's clearly been sitting there.
yeah, he's been there for a while. And Jeff comes in wanting his Lexus back, mad about the answers. And Duncan kind of goes the whole, how did you think I was going to get you all these answers in the first place? It was a lesson. You got to get over yourself. You got to do things the right way now. Jeff's like, why does everybody always try to teach me stuff? Now things are turning back on him, and he's got to look at how he's been bad. And it's a nice moment. He and Pierce have a little moment where Pierce talks about all of his divorces.
Yeah.
It's
What's
really
he say?
funny.
That was almost my trivia question for you, is how many times was he married? Was it 9?
7. He's married 7 times.
7 or 9.
It's like, I'm starting to think something's wrong with me. It's like, yeah, you
Well,
keep getting married.
Oh. Yeah, I like that little interaction. It's kind of cool how the group kind of builds one by one, with
Yeah.
the 3 guys out there, and then, the rest of the group comes out. But
Everyone's starting to realize that Jeff has some good qualities, and he probably needs some help. And
Yeah.
he definitely needs some help when it comes to Spanish. And everyone's starting to warm up to him, which is really nice. We get a really great classic Troy line.
Listen, it doesn't matter. You lose the jacket to please them, you keep it to piss them off. Either way, it's for them. That's what's weak.
Wow. You just wrinkled my brain, man.
yeah, that was
That's really
really,
funny.
good one. I also really did like the part where they were all mouthing things to each other because Jeff's sitting there all sad, and Abed is looking just so confused, and he's like, "Can you guys hear me? Am I deaf?"
Yes.
That was funny.
Really funny. And everyone's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, good. And Abed, like, one by one, looking at all the people, talking silently.
Yeah, I think Abed really shines in this episode.
Absolutely. I think he's the MVP. Jeff's a close second, but there's enough in this episode that's unlikable with Jeff. That,
Absolutely.
yeah, Abed totally steals the show. And maybe the entire series, you could say Abed steals the whole show.
I think Abed really adds, like, so many of the things that are memorable about Community and things that people talk about, still wouldn't be... a lot of them came from Abed or something involving him, or he added to them so much, which is, he's such a, integral part of the show.
Well, Abed's definitely the character in this in this show and in this pilot specifically that we haven't seen a character archetype like this a lot. It's the thing that this show has going for it that's really original. A lot of the other characters are pretty basic character archetypes. What makes them special are the quirks that they gave them and the actors and actresses that play them. But Abed's a really interesting character from the beginning. You want to know more about him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think Danny Pudi does a great job of playing him specifically, but also giving him a lot of depth. In the audio commentary, they compared Abed to Snoopy.
Really?
To how Abed, he appears one way, but when he's on his own or when he's in a comfortable situation, he becomes so much more, and it's like the world is like his sandbox that he just like moves all the toys
Wow,
around
absolutely.
in, like Snoopy with the Red Baron and stuff like that. And I think that's a great analogy.
That is, because I mean, there's so many sequences in the show that are, so much in Abed's,
Yeah.
imagination or the way that he sees the world, that it is like that. And I think that, whereas, Snoopy is always kind of there for Charlie Brown and the gang, when they need him, kind of slipping in and doing, little things here and there to either help or hurt, depending on what he's trying to get done. Abed is kind of like that to the group, that he's always there, seeing it from a different perspective, or he's aware of so many more sides than everyone else is. So it's cool.
I think it shows that Abed isn't used to being part of a group of people like this, so he's still kind of reserved. But as the show goes on and he gets to know these people and can let himself go, he's awesome. And he is like Snoopy, whereas the world's like a sandbox that he's playing in, or the world's like a movie that he's directing. I think it's really great.
Absolutely, and I think that one thing that I really like about Abed's character when it comes to portraying the world through someone with Asperger's or anywhere on autism spectrum disorder, whatever level of it is, that he's someone who is at community college and is to some degree on his own in the world, and he's processing it the way that he can, and he sees things through a different lens that I think adds just such a refreshing point of view to the show that you really don't get in any other sitcoms.
Yeah, it's such a testament to Dan's writing of the character and of the way Danny Pudi plays him. It's just great.
So I'd be curious to know if either Dan Harmon or Danny Pudi has anyone in their lives or anyone like personal experience with it, because it's so spot on, a lot of the mannerisms things. It's just research, or I wonder if he actually has some experience with that in his life.
I'm not sure. From hearing Danny talk about the way he played the character, it's clear that he took it very seriously, and he wanted to know Abed and how he acts and how he reacts to things. And like if Abed was referencing to something, Danny would throw himself into it so he'd know what Abed was talking about. He was like, if I'm going to be this pop culture encyclopedia that Abed is, I have to actually know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And that's one cool thing is it's like Abed's, autism is never a joke. It can bring about some comedic situations, but that is never the joke, and that's one thing that I love about it.
And honestly, whether or not Abed is autistic or not, it doesn't matter much to the show. That's not the point.
Exactly, that's not the point. Is he is the way he is. Whether you put a name on it or not, he is who he is, and that's okay.
Yeah, and outside of Jeff saying you have Asperger's in this episode, for the most part, I think all the characters are super respectful of how he is, and yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the cool things about Community is, even though some of the characters are definitely, sitcom tropes that you've seen before, they're all different and they're all outcasts, for some reason or another. Even Jeff, as much as he wants to deny it, is an outcast.
Yeah.
And he kind of learns that as the show goes on, but it's cool because everyone comes together.
Well, yeah,
they are a community.
Jeff's totally an outcast because he was in like the law world, and he's been kicked out of it, and now he's at a college where he doesn't know anybody and doesn't appear to have a lot of people in his life. He is totally an outcast. He just thinks he's the coolest guy in the room.
Yeah.
Kind of like Troy in this episode a little bit.
Exactly like Troy. And it's funny, thinking ahead in the show, and I'm really excited to kind of see this again, see the transformation that these characters are going to go through because of how different, they are from now to... Especially Troy, is totally different.
And Britta and Annie.
Britta, Annie. Shirley's pretty much Shirley, but
Shirley's one of the most underserved characters in the entire show. They don't do right by her, I think.
No, and I think that I don't know what it stems from, like why they chose to just keep her character pretty flat, or what it is. I don't know if her sole role is to just kind of paint that picture of a person, which we'll probably get into at some point further in the show. But.
Yeah, I think some of it might be that comedy and the people working on the show, that it's kind of a boys' game,
Absolutely.
That I think maybe they don't always know how to write for the female characters. They definitely say that in the commentary about Britta, that they didn't really know who Britta was yet. It's kind of like how on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Caitlin Olsen had to tell the guys to like make Dee as weird as them and as like gross, because that's how people are, and they didn't know how to write comedy for a woman like that.
And I feel like with It's Always Sunny, I mean, that's one of the best examples of, them figuring it out, because I think Dee's hilarious. I think she has some of the funniest moments in that whole show.
So to wrap up the way the pilot closes out, so Jeff's out there, one by one the group come and they decide maybe to give this guy a chance. Britta's not so sure, but in the end they're like, we're all going to work together. And they walk back outside, leaving Jeff by himself with this really great cover of Don't You Forget About Me playing.
Oh, I love that.
Just a really sweet moment to close out the episode.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
I think that it was a really, really great ending. I think it was great having the Breakfast Club song. That pulls me back because there's a shot when Jeff and Duncan are standing in front of the football field, and I think Duncan's wearing that like duster jacket, and that's very reminiscent of the end of Breakfast Club when Judd Nelson walks out in a similar walks to the football field with Don't You Forget About Me playing and throws a fist up in the air wearing a similar kind of jacket. And I was wondering if that was... I'm sure it was probably intentional, but I think the final shot was awesome with Jeff by himself and the song.
And then the episode is dedicated to John Hughes, the director of Breakfast Club, who passed away the year Community started. So even that this show, Community, that's so referential and does a lot of homages, even its first episode, which is one of its least referential and least like homage specific, was
an homage.
An homage to John Hughes. And I think that's
Absolutely.
great. What a great way to start the show.
Yeah.
It's not quite its chaotic, hilarious self yet, but that warmth and just good feeling that this show gives me was definitely there from the beginning. The cast knocks it out of the park. I can't wait to keep watching more of it and fall in love with the show all over again.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited. I think this was a great start to the show. I'm really excited for the next episode, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the episodes that really got me into it. Since watching the pilot the first time, it didn't quite hook me. The second episode, when I went back and watched the show, definitely did.
I think it really, sets the stage for a lot of the comedy that's to come in the show, especially with the first couple seasons.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about the first episode?
I think it's a good start. As far as pilots go, it's not my absolute favorite, but certainly not my least favorite.
But not many pilots are that good.
Exactly. I think that, shows like Arrested Development, great pilot.
The pilot for Arrested Development is probably my favorite comedy pilot of all time.
It's so good. You can't touch that, but I think it is better than most sitcom pilots, because usually they're carbon copies. Every pilot is meet this character, here's the love interest. And this suffers from that a little bit, but I think it makes up for it by how smart the writing is.
They don't exactly know what the show is going to be yet. In most pilots, so they're just kind of trying to do something that's going to hook the audience and make them care about the love connection or make them care about the main character's plight to get them to come back next week, and then they can start figuring out who these characters are and what the show's going to be and what makes everybody tick. And this show, you're right, the pilot does suffer from some of that stuff a little bit, but a lot of it is there. The spirit's there, and
and you can see it.
Yeah, you can. All right, well, to wrap things up, typically at the end of these episodes, we talked about this pilot for well over an hour, but typically I'd like to end these with letting people interact with us if there are people out there listening. We've set up an email address for the show, and you can email us at can'tdisappointpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you'd like to interact with us other places, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Can't Disappoint Podcast. Also, follow us on Twitter at You Can't Disapod. Disapod with one S and two P's. So that's my spiel about that. I hope people listen to this, and I hope people want to talk about the show with us. Tell us what you thought of the first episode. Anything you want to know about our takes on the show or us in general. We're super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're just a couple of guys who really like a TV show, and that we're excited to share our thoughts with you, and for you to share your thoughts with us.
Absolutely.
And really just really embrace this community.
Yes, we're gonna create our own community. Hopefully, it's already a huge community of fans. I hope some people get on board with this.
We're happy to be in the stratosphere.
Yeah, like way on the outside edge of the stratosphere, but
yeah.
So yeah, I think that about wraps things up. This was fun.
Absolutely, it's been a blast. Looking forward to episode 2. We'll see you guys there.
Yeah, next time we should definitely record it.
Yeah,
We
I
should
think
definitely
so.
record this next time.
This was fun. This was a good practice.
Yeah. I'll get back to you. We might be looking at a couple other options for co-hosts.
I get it.
But thanks for making yourself available. Don't hold your breath for a phone call.
Yeah, I understand. When coming soon to you, a podcast called Candy Crush Saga, the saga of my Candy Crush journey.
Also, we're starting after show podcast, talking You Can't Disappoint a Podcast, in which we will be reviewing the podcast that we've just recorded.
Yes. Most of the episodes will be titled Disappointed in Can't Disappointed. Can't Disappoint podcast. Just a lot of disappointment everywhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, this has been really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you join us next week for the next episode. So yeah, signing off. This is Zach.
And this is Steven. We'll see you guys next time.
From inside the Dreamatorium, this has been You Can't Disappoint a Podcast. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Changing the day